Clear.
I just changed some of my settings on my Zoom.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Peter. I keep meaning to be in person, and then the city schedules meetings at 4:30 and 6:30 on Monday night.
Okay.
So then I'm not able to do both. Are we ready?
We have 1 minute. You do have a question.
Is that Malcolm at the end of the table there? Hey, Malcolm.
Hi.
Hey, Vicky. Hey, Joe.
Hey.
Hey, Shannon. Sarah. Who's sitting next to you, Sarah?
This is Dr. Stephanie Swearingen, our new lead veterinarian. She's here to do a presentation today. And it is 5:30 now, if you would like to get started.
I would love to get started. Okay, are we good audio wise? Start?
Yep.
Okay. Welcome to April 8th, Joint Animal Service Commission meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order and start with introductions. I'm Lisa Parsley, the chair from Olympia City Council. I'm going to jump around the screen and then we'll go to the in-room participants. I'm going to move over to Peter. Can you?
Present.
Amy.
Present. I'm with Animal Arts, the architects doing the design.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you for doing that. And I maybe should have been clearer when I said I would introductions, sort of say who you are, I guess. And then Sarah.
Yes, I'm Sarah Bowman. I'm a principal at Animal Arts.
Somehow I muted myself. I got to stop playing with the settings. Sarah Hawk, can you lead the introduction to the room?
Did you mention Commissioner Klaus first?
Oh, I didn't see her.
I am here. I'm driving, so I've got my camera off, but Emily Klaus, Thurston County Commissioner for District 5, and I'll be on camera as soon as I can.
Sorry, Emily. Thank you,
That's
Sarah.
okay.
Oh, and then Michael Murphy, before we go to the room, I would put him on the spot. He just logged on. Can you introduce yourself, Michael?
Is that for me?
Yep.
Oh, sorry, I just logged on. Hi, Mike Murphy. I am a veterinarian and representative of Thurston County Humane Society.
Okay. Now, Sarah Hawk.
I'm Sarah Hawk, Executive Director for Joint Animal Services. Do you want me to?
Dr. Stephanie Swearingen. I'm the lead veterinarian at Joint Animal Services.
Miller, City of Lacey, Deputy Mayor.
Dr. Vicky Smith, Deschutes Animal Clinic.
Joe McCook, Feline Friends.
Shannon Kelly Fong, Assistant City Manager for the City of Lacey.
Wow. Thank you, everybody, for patience. I would love to get an approval of the agenda and the consent agenda items, which include the agenda, the meeting minutes for February 12th, the February shelter statistics, and the March shelter statistics.
So
Taking a motion.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All righty. Do we have any public comments, Sarah?
I submitted one written public comment to you before the meeting. Otherwise, we do not have any public comment.
If I could just for a second go back to the adoption, you had a first, second, you had a ayes, and then we would need to do any nays and then what the final outcome was.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Robert's rules, and I apparently are not having a conversation today. So is there anyone opposed to the approval of the agenda and the consent agenda? Hearing none, the agenda and the consent agenda are approved. Thank you. Now, do we have anything else on the public comment?
No, we do not have any public comment except for what was submitted earlier prior to the meeting.
Okay, that means we're moving on to the business items. 5A is the space needs assessment update and budget amendment discussion. It looks like there's a couple of you in there. Sarah, do you want to kick it off for us?
I do. So joining us today, we have Sarah Bowman and Amy Sanchez from Animal Arts. They are the group that is doing our space needs assessment. And they are joining us today to do a presentation to talk a little bit about some of the site needs and specifications, including our current site. So with that, I will hand it over to Amy and Sarah.
Thank you. And we decided to make it confusing and have two Sarahs, so apologies.
Exactly. I have it pulled up, Sarah, if you want me to share, or you got it?
Okay. Good. Yep. Perfect. Technology in the room, is that working okay?
Yes.
Yeah, we can
Perfect.
see.
Okay. Always good to check. Great. We prepared just a really brief update for you all, mainly focusing on our analysis of the existing site. And so, big picture, you all hired us to understand your operations and your needs. So we came out, we visited you all, we listened to your team and their priorities and their biggest challenges. We used that to inform a space needs analysis. And so with that, we took into account your current staffing, recommended staffing, the list of all the spaces you all told us you need to do your job, taking into account best practices, industry guidelines, and that basically helped us to find the overall scope of what you all need to move forward as an organization. We then translated that giant spreadsheet into adjacency diagrams. So looking at bubbles of space of approximate scale, which we then checked on your site as well as some other sites. And so that's really what we wanted to present to today. And once you all have a site and a direction for moving forward, then we will prepare a more detailed design that will help with cost analysis and coming up with a game plan on how to get you all into a new facility. When we think about adjacencies, what we really want to do is make sure that everything's in the right place so that we're reducing stress on animals so that it's really efficient for the staff to operate and it's very welcoming to the public. And so there are a lot of factors that influence this. First of all, when you show up to a facility, you should know where to go if you're a member of the public. You should know where to enter if you would like to adopt an animal or if you're looking to relinquish an animal or receive other services. So we want to make sure the adoptions are front and center so that you can be as welcoming as possible to the public. We also want to make sure that we're managing the emotions of the public. You probably feel very different if you are relinquishing your family pet that you can no longer afford to care for versus you're excited to bring home a new kitten. So we want to make sure that we've managed the emotions of the public appropriately so that you all can provide the best customer service. Similarly, we also need to separate species. So in general, dogs and cats do not like being around each other, and cats are stressed out when they hear barking dog noise. So as we think about how a building lays out, we want to make sure we're not unnecessarily moving dogs past cats and stressing them out, because when they're stressed, they get sick. And then when they get sick, they become even more difficult to care for. And so that's added expenses for you all. Beyond all of us caring about the well-being of the cat, we also know it makes everyone's life more difficult who works in an animal shelter. So we want to make sure we're keeping the species separated to keep them from getting stressed out. And then we also want to make sure that it's easy for the staff to move from space to space and get the supplies that they need to take a dog to the vet clinic, to get altered and back to its housing. Easy to go get, cat litter and whatever you all are doing, running to the sheds in the back of your facility right now. as we looked at everything you need to do your jobs well and house the animals that your community has to deal with, we determined that a 2 to 3 acre site, and that's usable land, is really the best bet. So as a general rule, the building should be 25 to 30% of the site. And that lets us have space for dog yards, for stormwater retention, for parking. So all of the things that you need for the building to function. It should be in a location that's safe for staff and visitors. So a lot of these pet resource centers are really run by volunteers, and they have such an important role in assisting the staff, especially as you all are short-staffed with open positions like many other organizations across the country. A good volunteer base can really help improve customer service, help enrich the animals. So we want to make sure that they're safe. They feel safe when they come to your facility, that they can walk a dog or go to the dog yards without being worried about their well-being. More in the nitty-gritty, we want to make sure a new site is a permitted use to have veterinary clinic and animal shelter on it. If it's not, then that just adds a lot of complexity and paperwork to the process in terms of getting planning approval. Sometimes there's special use permits or conditional things that need to happen that you might not know of ahead of time, and then it inevitably adds project cost. We also want to make sure that your neighbors are appropriate. So if there's a lot of residential nearby, then that can be tricky because you have dogs that bark at times. So we want to make sure that if there is residential adjacent to a new site, that it's something you can plan for and orient the dogs away from the residents or far enough away that it's not a problem. I was just wrapping up a paper on acoustics and criteria for outdoor dogs and barking. So this is at the forefront of my mind right now. And then the other portion of that is we want to make sure the noise coming into the site is fine. So when we think about steady highway noise, that's not as detrimental to dogs as sudden noises like a shooting range nearby or right next to where fireworks are shot off every 4th of July. So we really want to make sure we're managing that stimuli for the animals so that we're not stressing them out. Public transit's incredibly important for your team to be able to get to work and also for people to be able to visit your facility and receive services. You are all also very unique in that you have a lot of different wildlife habitat conservation areas that are in relatively urban and suburban areas. So making sure we're not in an area where there's a lot of gophers and we need to be aware of mitigation. And that just adds another layer of complexity to the site. From a cost standpoint, we also want to make sure that there's not a lot of utility upgrades required. So if, for example, you're at the end of a street and you need to pave it and bring power all the way down the street or underground power lines, this is something we're really sensitive to right now as all of our power is off for the last couple of days. We want to make sure that we've taken those things into account, that the utilities aren't going to be incredibly cumbersome for you all to have to pay for any upgrades. So with that in mind, we took a look at your existing site. One of the first cons that we heard of when we were visiting is that it really doesn't feel safe to the volunteers and that there have been incidences in the parking lot and walking dogs around the property. So people don't generally feel safe at your current site, and everyone wanted more secure parking because of its current location. There's also limited room for development, which we'll dive into in the next slide once we look at the wetland buffer zones and the flood zone that's currently on your site. Public transit exists, but it's a bit hard to access because it's across the busy street. So depending on which direction, it's a little bit stressful to have to catch the bus when you're opposite the building. It's also a little bit awkward to turn into the site. I think everyone else that we saw ended up driving past and flipping a U-turn and coming back around. So that's not necessarily the best for customer service either. Civil did some investigations, and the redevelopment would require some upgrades to utilities. So while you have them on the site, they were concerned that if we build a new facility at this location, then that's going to trigger upgrades to the utilities, which will be costly. On the plus side, you're currently located here. People know where to find you. It's a permitted use because you're doing it. So there are some pros to the site, but really when we dive into it, the list of cons is a lot longer than the pros. And then we look at how do we actually put a building on your site? It gets even more complicated. So the hatched area is either wetlands or floodplains, and we're basically only allowed to build a new building on the previously developed portions of the site, so everything that's paved. The other complexity is you will need to stay operational. Your animals need to receive care to be adopted during the construction period. This isn't a couple months and the building's up. This is a year, I would guess, at minimum, based on what we're seeing in terms of miscellaneous component delays, like main electrical gear, that construction's just taking a while these days. And so relocating animals for that period of time would be cost prohibitive and incredibly difficult operationally. So our starting point is that you all should stay operational. It should be as smooth as possible. So when we look at what space do we have if we're avoiding your current building and we're avoiding wetlands and all of the other areas we can't build in, we end up with this kind of interesting elongated shape. And if we try to actually put your building in there, we end up with red, which is a more public zone that can face what would be a new parking lot. When your building's demolished, that's fine. We've got cats and dogs, but there's a bit more connection than what we would like. And then we've crammed veterinary up towards the front. And so what we're struggling with here is fundamentally there's a lot of things that need to happen on the site, but we don't really have enough room to get behind the building. So for you all to take a trailer, if you end up with a one miscellaneous pig that you need to hold for a little bit until someone else gets it from you, or all of the chickens. And so large vehicle access for deliveries, for the animals, for even fire is really problematic at the end of your site. And so if you were going to build on site, it's really difficult. It's not a great flow. It's not going to be particularly efficient for your staff when we look at the adjacencies and supply movement. And, we would probably have to get the fire department to waive their need to actually access the back of the site. So I know you all don't see a ton of forest fires in your wetland flood zone area, but fire department does like to access all of the building. So it gets really challenging to develop your current site. So our recommendation is to look elsewhere and to find a site that's actually suitable, that you can start with a clean slate or start with something that ideally has utilities that are going most of the way towards it, or a paved road. So starting with a new site that's appropriate, that has the right adjacencies, not much residential neighbors, no loud noises. And then from there, we would work with you all to actually design a building on an appropriate site. Any questions? Sarah, is there anything I missed that you wanted to highlight?
I don't think so. I think you covered kind of the current things that we're discussing and going over and looking at right now.
Anybody have any questions? I have one. Oh, go ahead, Michael. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, what was the square footage of what do you think they need going forward?
Of the building itself?
Mm-hmm.
Amy, do you have that handy? It's like 20.
Yeah, so we're looking at around 25,000 square feet for the new building.
Versus our current 8,000 square
Yes,
feet.
sorry.
Yeah. And that would include, bits of covered area, things like that. So a lot more indoor, outdoor kennels, ideally.
I don't know, this is part of your service, or if we've considered this, Shannon and Sarah, with these recommendations that we now have clearly outlined, do we have access to GIS data that might highlight some of the properties that would be a good fit and then
We do.
seek out?
We do, and City of Lacey has actually utilized a real estate agent to help us identify any properties that are potentially for us to take a look at, and if they meet the criteria that we're looking for.
Even if they're not for sale?
It depends. I think it would depend on the type of property that it is. To see if we can have those conversations, but I believe currently they're looking at what is currently listed or potentially going to be listed.
That is correct. Chair partially. Sarah, do you mind
reason-
stopping the screen share?
The reason I ask is I know there's 4 major jurisdictional entities, 3 municipal, 1 county, and then the school districts, not just Olympia, that may be sitting on land that would be ideal. And there may be a way to work with them to see if this land is excess and can be surplus to Joint Animal Service. And obviously Lacey would be the ultimate holder. But I just think what I'd hate to do is have us be cornered into a position where we take land because it's only on the market or about to be listed, when jurisdictions are sitting literally on acres and acres and acres of land that they're not doing anything with, and some are not planning to do anything with.
Chair Parks, I do want to comment that we have been working with some jurisdictional partners on looking at what could be possibilities. I think your comment about the school district is heard, but we have been working with some of the entities around Thurston County to try to identify, again, properties that may be available for this particular type of use.
Okay, sorry, I just keep pushing because we do a lot of land banking, and the Regional Housing Council does land banking, and so we know there's quite a bit of land out there that is governmental that we should be seeing who owns. If it fits our criteria, see who owns it and see how attached they are to it.
And there has been some beginning investigations and inquiries to the jurisdictions of sites that we have identified. But some already, the ones that we have identified so far have all had plans attached to them for future use currently. So it doesn't mean that something won't come up, and it is something for us to look at.
Okay. Maybe as jurisdictions, Emily, Peter, you're sitting, Malcolm, with Shannon, we should also kind of push our own staff and say, what do you guys think? Because sometimes it takes us to do the pushing to loosen up the grip on some things.
Roger that.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. I appreciate that. And I will definitely keep my eyes and ears out for an opportunity to have those discussions with our staff.
Thank you, Emily. Appreciate it. Sorry, I'm a broken record on that one. I apologize, but I would hate to be cornered into buying a piece of property that may not be ideal because we can't get the one that is ideal and it's owned by somebody like a government entity.
Or
Okay. Is that it for this segment? Okay.
Well,
like-
I mean, that's it for Sarah and Amy and their presentation, but we do have a portion, we do have a budget amendment that is attached to this. So as part of your packet, you guys should see there is a budget amendment.
Thank you all. We'll hop off.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you,
Thank
Sarah.
you.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
By the way, Sarah, can I just say, and Shannon, I really like this new link to the agenda. I'm a little rusty working with it, but I like it. I think Olympia should do it. It's really excellent.
Well, I have to give kudos where kudos is, and it's not me or Shannon. It is actually the City of Lacey Clerk's Department. And our City of Lacey clerk, Alyssa Fontaine, who has taken over helping with the agenda and getting it posted and helping to organize everything. So kudos goes to that team for sure. I'm just a long
love it.
on this one, and I like it too.
And I'm going to tell people at the Olympia City Council meeting tomorrow night that Lacey has got one up on us, that the way they're doing their agendas is excellent.
But with that, we do have a budget amendment, and it's to the space needs assessment for a total additional of $30,000. We had already budgeted $200,000 to go this year towards the assessment, but we are asking for an additional $30,000. The breakdown is as follows: is there's about $11,000 for Public Works engineering project time. We're looking at about $6,000 for an appraisal, as well as about $13,000 for a critical area evaluation. In terms of looking at property when it comes to like critical areas like wetlands, things like that, like getting an idea of what that looks like. So we are asking JASCOM to approve the budget amendment for $30,000 this evening.
Can I just, the Public Works engineering project time, can you just outline what that is for?
Absolutely. That's additional time that our engineering department has to spend on the space needs assessment. So additional background work, any investigation portions that they need to do as far as like land pulling up records. And so it's just additional making sure that we're covering the costs for their time in that department for this project.
So
Anybody else have? Yes.
Bit more information on that as well, just to kind of add to what Sarah was saying is, through our jurisdictional assessments for joint animal services, we do have funding for, city staff here at the City of Lacey to help with some administrative services. But this is an extra project over and beyond that requires some of our, team from Public Works, like Sarah mentioned, to work specifically on that. So that's covered in this staff's time.
Thank you, Shannon. So on this one, because it's a budgetary, it will be the elected officials voting only.
That is correct.
Okay. Is there any question anyone has though about this amendment?
Being only my second meeting, I think. Is there a copy of the budget in here that I just didn't see?
I didn't put the full budget in here. That was, I sent the initial full budget out at the February meeting.
And how does 30 affect the full budget?
It's not a huge, the 30,000 would be coming from our reserves. And currently we have roughly $1.7 million in reserves.
And that's restricted and unrestricted. So
correct.
There's a little bit more nuance than that.
There is nuance, like it's not just sitting there for use. This would come out of one of the capital reserve portions of our.
You said 1.2.
We have 1.7 overall.
7 in reserve.
But again, a lot of it is allocated, restricted specifically by donors and or restricted per JASCOM, depending. So just because we have 1.7, that's not for general use.
Is there a capital portion?
There is a capital portion.
And
that one I can't tell you off the top of my head, but I could email you what we have.
is it more than 30?
Yes, yes.
We can send out all that information to the commission here following this meeting, so you can get a good idea of that. Absolutely. As well as resending the budget for 2024. Basically, what the ask here today is to increase the amount from the $200,000 that was already approved through the budget process to add $30,000 for these 3 items specifically listed here, which is the Public Works engineering project time for an appraisal and then for a critical area evaluation.
Thank you.
Shannon, that'd be a good idea. I can't remember off the top of my head the reserves, so that'd be an excellent document to get to all of us if that's possible.
Yep.
And And since Malcolm started the conversation, is this 30 and the 200 coming out of capital, or is this coming out of the unrestricted? I can't remember.
The 200,000 is coming out of the general fund portion, and the
Okay.
30,000 can come either out of capital or the general fund portion.
Okay, thank you.
So what I will say on the reserves too is we are in the middle of doing a huge assessment on what the reserves are and taking a look at a way to kind of comprehensively look at that with this project in mind. So at a future commission meeting sometime soon, we'll probably be having some more discussions just to walk you through what that looks like and what the future could look like as well.
In that review, can you make sure we don't need to update any of the policies on these reserves as well?
Yes.
Okay. Any more discussion? Because oh, go ahead, Peter, go ahead.
So potentially I see or I hear about 500,000 will be taken out of the 0.7. Is that what we're looking at?
The 30,000.
The 30,000, we have already, the 200,000 is already accounted for in the budget. So it's just an additional 30,000 that would be coming out.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the budget amendment? If I hear no more discussion.
So moved.
So move.
Any more
Second.
discussion? Oh, thank you. We got seconds and 2 so moves already. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. It looks like we have gone with option number 1, which is to approve the budget amendment, adding 30,000 to the space needs assessment project. All right, that is just, I just love your agenda. Oh, instead of having to switch like 50 million screens to get from one thing to another. This is great. We're moving on to 5B, and we're going to go to the Joint Animal Services Medical Program, and we get to meet our veterinarian today, it appears, with Dr. Swearingen.
You do. And so give me one moment to share the screen and hand it over. But before I let her take over, I do want to do a brief introduction. So Dr. Swearingen joined us in December of 2023. She was originally from rural Nebraska. She received her bachelor's of science in animal science from University of Nebraska-Lincoln and her doctorate of veterinary medicine from the cooperative program in veterinary medicine between the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and Iowa State University. She spent 2 years in practice in rural mixed animal practice in North Dakota, moved to Washington in 2014, worked 2 years in a small animal general practice at Fir Grove Veterinary in Puyallup, and then 5 years at Tumwater Veterinary Hospital. She was also the shelter veterinarian that at the Humane Society for Tacoma and Pierce County for 1.5 years. And then she worked briefly as a stint as a relief veterinarian, which is how we snagged her in the first place. She was doing relief for us, and then she joined us among other places too. Don't get me wrong, she's doing relief for others. We just, we're trying to recruit hardcore. And then she joined us in December. And so she was also, while she was doing relief, was actually helping us organize the new medical clinic and getting everything situated and telling us what we needed to order. She was getting things organized. She is our veterinarian that started doing surgeries for us in June. And with that, I'm going to let Dr. Swearingen take it from here.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'll just say I'm happy to be here, honored to have this position. This is my community, my strays, and it's just very rewarding to be taking care of them. So these are the numbers that we've accomplished since June. So far we've altered about 200 dogs, roughly 500 cats. We've also done many other procedures. I'm going to list some of those as well. So 55 other surgical procedures, sedated procedures, whatnot, for a total of 752 different procedures in our clinic. Sorry. So this is a graph I created just basically starting from when we started surgery to now. Back in June, we only did 2 days of surgery, but in those 2 days, we altered almost 40, we did almost 40 procedures. There was still, I think, 40-ish procedures done elsewhere. And the shelter actually adopted out around 15 animals that were not altered at a time of adoption. July, we were able to expand to more days. And so we went up to almost 80. Now I'm not doing just spay neuter, so we do lots of amputations, longer procedures. So total numbers, if we were just doing spay neuter, probably could have been higher at the shelter. But since we're doing some of the longer, more expensive procedures also, you know, the total numbers are less, but we do average 20 to 25 surgeries per day. And even when we do longer procedures, we still do 15 or so spay neuter a lot of the days. So I think our important things is at this point, since I start, so you can kind of see the June through November, I was coming roughly once a week for relief. And we slowly were able to increase numbers. You've got kitten season, all of those summer, fall months. So your total number of spay neuter is pretty high need. But December, when I started and I took over managing the surgery list and we were able to expand number of days, we spiked to over 100 in shelter, and our number of outside spay neuter went down dramatically as well. Right now, all we're using is Northwest Spay and Neuter. We don't really have any plans of having animals altered anywhere except there and the shelter. We've also gotten down to where we're not, the last 3 months, we have not adopted out any unaltered animals. And we haven't had to do surgeries anywhere else. The only one we've done is a specialty surgery, that, you know, a TPLO that I can't perform. But we haven't had to do anything outside of the shelter.
Also, just the caveat to that, even though we've adopted out unaltered animals, they were with appointments.
Yeah.
So we were getting them altered. It just, they didn't have their surgeries before.
You know, but it is true that some of them maybe never got altered. I know we had a return dog this year that was adopted a year ago and was still intact. So, you know, hopefully most of them got altered afterwards, but it's probably not 100%. But right now we don't plan to do that anymore. So we're just holding animals a couple days sometimes, but not always. We're able to keep up pretty well. And I know that these total numbers will go up and up, as it already has from February to March. We started doing some colony cat spay neuter. So that probably accounted for most of our increase from February to March. This is kind of a rough list of other surgeries we've done. So I'm pretty willing to do most things beyond fracture repair, major orthopedic. But we've done various entropions, enucleations. We're starting to do dentals. I did full mouth cat extractions last week. We've done some very large tumors. I've got one case in the presentation, but we did also take out a 5-pound ovarian mass in a husky. So that was pretty exciting. You know, a lot of different things. And a lot of these procedures maybe would have been outside the budget of the shelter. And a lot of these animals would have potentially been euthanized or adopted out as is. And you have enucleations or entropions that now a new adopter may need to fund after adoption. And a lot of those things are just outside of the budget that people can afford for pet care, but it's pretty easy for us to do them there. This dog, Cornell, who finally got adopted last week, she had, I don't know, 5 or 6 medical conditions that she came in with. So severe otitis, And she had an entropion in her right eye, which actually nobody on intake noticed. I was just walking down the kennels and I'm like, your eye's not right. So I was able to pretty quickly fix that, and she ended up looking really good. You know, but that's something that maybe she would have just been adopted with that and just had this itchy, uncomfortable eye for maybe her whole life. So, you know, it's pretty rewarding to just be able to help them, and there's not really too much restriction on what we can do. I've got a couple animals. So this is Catcher. He was a really cute polydactyl, came in with a radial nerve paralysis. And so we were able to amputate that front leg, and I've got him all grown up in his adoptive home. And they said he's just a great cat, runs around like, you know, he doesn't really care that he has 3 legs. So, but he was super cute. He actually had a little ringworm exposure too. And so he ended up in our care for a couple months. So, but ultimately got the care he needed and living a happy life. This is Silver. He was actually adopted by our Becca, our positive outcomes coordinator. But he was one where they had told me he was at the shelter. This is still when I was doing relief. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll look at him when I get in, and our surgery list wasn't very full. And I'm like, you can see his little, this is his intake photo. This really fat leg was just severely infected, probably some really old injury or fracture. But he was only 2-3 pounds. But this leg was just terribly abscessed, draining. And ultimately, if I hadn't been there and done the amputation that day, he would have been euthanized, because this just is a big time procedure. But that's him in dishwasher now, again, all grown up. This is a dog also that came in, and they told me, hey, we've got this dog, his scrotum's kind of dragging on the ground. And it really was. So again, it was one where I was there that day. We had time. I'm like, I'm just going to neuter this dog. And this is a large tumor. His testicles were normal, but this was 1.2 pounds, and it was a low-grade mast cell tumor. So I took him home afterwards. This is him in my house, like really happy to not have this large mass dragging between his back legs. But again, adopted out, and this is again something that potentially maybe he wouldn't have received treatment. This is a dog I did surgery on last week. So there's his intake photo, this Shar-Pei mix, all wrinkly. And I could tell I knew he had entropion, and I could tell this eye was really bugging him. And I just felt like, you know, I'm like, I don't know, he's got so much saggy skin. Do I really want to try this? But I'm like, I know that eye bothers him. And so I ended up taking off his facial fold because I couldn't get the eyes to correct the way I wanted them to without doing that. So we took that off, and then you could see this really large ulcer in his eye. And so, you know, without this, he probably would have maybe gone home with this, and it would have been a real struggle to get that, you know, healed. So I was able to do this. I was able to offer the adopter to come back and get the stitches out, and hopefully he'll recover well. That's kind of the surgery program, but, you know, I'm certainly doing a lot of medicine as well. So we started the surgeries in June, July, and that's all I came in for. But August, I started coming 1 day a week for medicine, and then starting in December. So I kind of broke down these numbers oddly, just to highlight different periods of time at the shelter. So from January to May, total number, this is kind of filtering out any medical exams, medical checks, rechecks, anything done at all. And this is just using our program. So it's a little hard to get to exact numbers, but using our medical charting program, there was 176 medical checks done by just shelter staff in the first part of last year. And there was only 45 by veterinary professionals. So I actually came like 1 or 2 days, just like for an hour, and did a few exams. And then Dr. Yanessa was coming in for occasional relief, but really there was, as far as on-site veterinary care, there was very little. there was probably more veterinary care outside the clinic that I just can't filter those numbers using our charting system. But overall, probably majority of your medical checks and care was just by shelter staff. June and July, I started coming for surgery. So these are busy months. You know, beginning of the year is fairly slow, but these are kind of busier months. Again, this is just me being there for surgery. I wasn't there to do medical exams specifically, but because I was there, they could catch me after surgery, before surgery, and look at animals. So actually had 47 medical checks in addition to the surgery, even though that's not what I was there for. And that was actually the only veterinary exams in our charting system for those 2 months. There was nothing on outside clinics noted. Doesn't mean it wasn't done. It's just I can't filter that exact number. August to November, I started coming in 1 day a week. So our number of medical exams and checks by me, basically we had 470. And then there was 10 outside vet clinics in this number. And then our number of shelter staff basically stayed the same, even though this is a longer period of time. December to March, now that I'm there all the time, we did 671 medical checks, exams, rechecks. And there was only 65, but whoa, sorry, I am so sorry. Got that all. There was only 65 by shelter staff, but actually all of those are just directions by me. So like them noting ringworm treatments, you know, doing this per Dr. Swearingen. So really all of that care is under my direction, even though it's not, you know, it is entered under a shelter staff name.
Yep.
And another interesting stat is, even though it's 671, there's only 345 different animals. So a lot more animals are getting follow-up care. So I think our total number of medical checks is much, much higher than last year. Documentation, I think, is a big thing where I think there was care being done. It just wasn't documented. The medical exams often are clicked completed, but there's no notes. So I don't really know what it was for. So we've just got a lot more follow-up care. And they're able to ask me about any animal that's there any day of the week, really. So we've got, looking, this is a very sensitive mouse, Sarah. You know, we definitely treat a lot of common conditions, but I have treated some more complex things. We've got right now, these 2 dogs are Demodex positive. So we just started treatments on that last week, but we've done quite a few different things, you know, several emaciated dogs. I had one that had salmon poisoning, hyperthyroid. I had a dog that I managed with a really resistant ear infection. And we were able to, this is still what I was doing to relief, but we were able to have her come in once a week to get her sedated, get her ear cleaned, apply a compounded ear medication, and we were able to get that cleared, where I think that would have been a pretty challenging thing for them to manage if you didn't have a veterinarian there. So got a few medical cases. So this doesn't really show what his injury was, but we've got Moose, he actually had a fractured rear foot, but one of the bones was still intact and he was using his leg well. So I was like, I think I'm just going to see if he can heal with crate rest. So we're able to send him to a foster home, and ultimately he healed up great. And this is him in his new home. But that's one thing where I think if you didn't have somebody with medical knowledge, you might look at it and say that cat has a broken foot. Like that's not something that we can treat and manage. So he maybe would have been euthanized. This kitty, I do know this one would have been euthanized if I wasn't there, because the shelter staff was very convinced that I was going to euthanize this cat or recommend that. You can't really see, this is his intake photo. It's not straight on, but he had some pretty serious facial trauma, very ulcerated on his nose, very congested. He was bleeding from his nose. His jaw was fractured. But I kind of looked at him like he seemed fit, body condition, and he was eating. And I'm like, well, let's just do some antibiotics, some pain meds, soft food. And we were able to get him in a foster home. And he just turned out a beautiful cat. I mean, you can't even, his family, I emailed them for an update yesterday, and they said he doesn't seem to have any issues at all. So this is him here, but he looked really rough. And I think, again, if you didn't have somebody that was confident or comfortable treating that, it would have been like, no, that cat's just, it's too sick. But really, he turned around really quick, and he looks great. This is a kind of a big example of the need for on-site vet care. So this cat came into the shelter, was in our shelter system for a full year. She had ringworm, so very treatable condition. This is her intake here, and then this is her all grown up at her adoption, when she finally got on the adoption floor. But so, looking at, it was June last year, they asked me to look at her, and she'd already been on treatment there for 8 months, which, if you know, that treatment should be like 1 to 2 months. And I looked at the notes, and there was no notes of any treatments whatsoever.
We had been treating her.
She
just
had
was
been treated. It just
resistant.
was, there was nothing in the charts.
Yeah.
So it's like, what has she even been receiving? And so I set up a protocol for ringworm treatment for in-house, and I took this cat to my house because they were at the point of euthanizing her. And I'm like, whatever, I'll just go put her in my, I have a backyard enclosure for dogs. And so she hung out in there. And I did lime sulfur in my garage and put her in this outdoor enclosure. And overall, she resolved her infection in about 2 months. So I think it's just like recognizing that this is not normal, and we should, something different needs to be done for this cat. So ultimately, she made it to the adoption floor. She actually developed a pyometra, so like serious uterine infection, while she was at my house too. So I also was able to go in on a Sunday and just spay her at the shelter. And she cured herself, but was in the system for a full year. So this is the situation that hopefully now we will avoid. Like, we shouldn't have animals on medical treatment for a year. Like, that won't happen now. So as far as future goals, I think we will continue to just try to do as much medical care, surgeries at the shelter as we can. But we do have some things that we can't do, and we don't have an X-ray machine. We don't have really the ability to hospitalize intensive care patients. We don't have isolation facilities. So there is still a need for local clinics occasionally. So hope to collaborate where we can with that. We will have lots of medical protocols coming out. I've already revised a few things, introduced a few things, and just trying to follow the Association of Shelter Veterinarians guidelines and trying to get the facility, or at least what we can, up to date. With our facility, there's some things that will be not possible, but I do think there's areas of improvement regardless. We've started doing staff training. So most of the staff really hasn't had any training from a medical professional. So we're working on that, just trying to improve care. They're starting to recognize more of the things that require treatment, and making sure that that's recognized early on. And we're starting to move animals through, I think, faster. So, prioritizing surgeries, getting things treated more promptly. All of that, I think it's improving. I would like to, one area that we really would help us treat more animals is more medical fosters. So right now we have very few foster parents that are willing to take any sort of medical case, even if it's just 2 weeks in their home for very basic care. It's difficult. So I think if we had that, we could certainly do more, because I know we have some dogs that have severe allergies and just really need oral medications, baths for a month. But it's hard to keep that animal in our shelter for that long. It's hard on them, and it's time consuming for the staff. So trying to get more of those animals out will help us get more treated. Eventually, and maybe in a year or so, that would be the hope, to hire a veterinary technician. We did just hire an assistant full-time, and that is really helping. But having a technician there every day that can kind of support the vet would really allow us to do more surgeries, do more things with the public. Eventually, I think we could support another veterinarian, maybe not full-time, but at least half time. I know other shelters of similar size have 1.5 vets. So I think there's enough work. And I think if we want to do more community programs, that's something that will be needed eventually. We would like to do some vaccine clinics. That's something that I think is very possible now, but once we get it all lined up. And then as well, like local low-cost spay neuter is just really critical for our community. First of the month, there is a parking lot full at the shelter waiting for the vouchers. But there's only so many. So if somebody comes on the second day of the month, they're probably out of luck. It happens every month, people come in and they're gone. And so there's not really a great place for them to do this. And I think it is one area that we would like to do eventually, because we can alter 30 animals in a day easily at a lot lower cost than trying to get that done elsewhere. And so I think that's what I have. If you have questions on anything.
What is the current coverage? You said you want to increase to 6 to 7 days a week. Currently, you're at 4.
I'm there at 4.
4.
Yeah, but I am kind of on call. Like, I don't know that they officially forced me to do it, but I do. Like Sarah didn't say you have to have your phone on you at all times. Like, but I am available most other days, unless I'm out of town or something like that. Mostly through telemedicine. So like I'll answer questions and they start treatments. I don't necessarily go in there. But occasionally I do pop in because I live here. So sometimes I'm just gonna go for like an hour and check on things. So, but eventually with more trained staff and like my assistant being there, I have to do that less.
So you said that the shelter currently does not have an X-ray machine. Is that something that you're
No,
looking to try to do?
Not in this.
I think when we have a new building, they're just really expensive and there's no space right now.
We
for
would
it,
have
so.
nowhere, there's no extra space to put an X-ray machine currently. Especially with the standards that you have to be at for safety and then also finding a space for it.
So that's something that's always outsourced.
That's one of the items that we always outsource to other veterinary clinics for X-rays.
But we mainly just send the pet there, they take the X-ray and they send it to me. So we don't actually have to have an exam done on a lot of cases. So we just pay for the
So we just kind of absorb that transportation cost.
Yeah.
What days do you do surgery?
Tuesdays mostly. So, and then adding on Fridays sometimes, or if we have like highly adoptable animals or puppies, I'm like, okay, let's just do these, in the morning this day. But I try to confine it to just 1 day a week because there's enough medical need that I need 2 days. And then I do admin, but a lot of that's medical, like catch up on my charts and stuff 1 day. So.
Mike?
Well, first of all, I'm just amazed with the success you've had in such a short period of time. That's a tremendous number of animals getting care. And I don't think you're overstating it a bit that some of those pets would no longer be with us, perhaps many of them. I'm really just kind of astounded by that success and just compliments to you and great report. But my question is kind of to Sarah that if you need more space, would another portable building adjacent to that one be a temporary, being that this construction project could be years down the road?
No, and that's because we don't even have the space for another building currently. Like we don't have enough room for an additional mobile building that we already have. We're under pretty tight constraints as far as what's left for storage, the outer buildings, as well as inside. So we will currently have to make do with the space that we have until we get the new building.
How many square feet is the current building?
8,000.
No, no, I'm sorry, the veterinary
Oh.
portion.
Like 800 feet?
Yeah, it's like, it looks like a trailer home, like a decently, so we have a surgery room, a prep area, a small area for kennels, and then we have like our autoclave equipment and that, and a bathroom, so it's pretty tight. There's not space for really, it'd be great to put the microscope out there, but there is not space for that. Like, we couldn't do blood machines or anything like that if we wanted to, so we have to leave space to get all the cats in there for surgery and then, you know, move the animals around and stuff, so.
You should come down, Dr. Murphy, and see it. It's
Yeah.
pretty amazing space for as small as it is.
Well, with that invitation, I'd really like to.
We would love to have you.
I might know where you could get a ProSite CBC machine. You'd
Oh,
have
yeah.
to buy the cartridges. It might even be thrown away if I don't grab it.
We can talk offline about that, Lisa.
So just saying, is there any other questions? Thank you, Sarah. I agree. This is impressive, and this is the power of bringing a veterinarian into the shelter. Thank you.
And we definitely do have some like smaller equipment needs that, you know, if you have things that you don't need, sometimes.
I may.
Yeah, you know.
I have a basement full of stuff, so just letting you know. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Swearingen. I really, do you have another question, Malcolm?
Well, just as being the newest member, are you the first staff veterinarian that we've had?
We've, in 40 years of operations, we've never had a staff veterinarian.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Deputy Mayor, I'm glad you brought that up because I think it is important to note that this has been the work of number one. I think Sarah, I just want to highlight, has been really working hard to get the veterinary staff going at Joint Animal Services, but also of Joint Animal Services Commission with the strategic planning process. This was something that was identified as one of the big things that you all wanted to focus on. So I think it's really monumental to be able to stand here and listen to all of the great things that you're doing, Doctor, after 3 years and plus before my time of working to get to this point. So
because the origination of having a medical department came from two shelter audits, both from the ASPCA as well as UC Davis. His shelter medicine program, both identified us having a lack of a veterinarian and a medical team on site as our largest barrier for moving animals through the system. And that was back in 2019. And then the following year, we were awarded a grant to start the process for the modular building to be put in. Then COVID hit, we got a slight delay. But once that was up and running and completely built, we were operating definitely on it. If we build it, they will come sort of field of dreams operation. I built it before I had a veterinarian. But it's been a multi-year process within the position being open for almost a year before we were able to hire somebody. So it's quite an accomplishment, and we're so thankful that Dr. Swearingen is here to be doing the medical treatments that she's doing. And it's a relief for staff to be able to go to a medical professional and have an immediate decision outcome, somebody to come look at this animal rather than us, making calls for the next 30 minutes trying to find somebody who has an opening at a clinic to get an animal in. So for operationally, this is a much more cost-effective way to be doing business as well.
Thank you, May.
Thank you.
And Shannon, I'm just going to call Sarah out again. Her being our executive director is the large reason that we're actually getting our strategic plan done. Sorry, commission members, but I really do think a strong executive director like Sarah is the reason we're here. So thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, you guys. I appreciate you, and I could not do it without your guidance and leadership as well. So thank you, as well as the team. So we have a great team.
Okay, welcome, Dr. Swearingen. We'll be hearing hopefully more reports from you. So we're going to move on to 5C, the Nisqually Indian Tribe Professional Service Agreement. Just a heads up, I may have to go shortly after this. I promise I will not let them book me another meeting immediately after this one, and one immediately before next time.
So Peter, it sounds like once Chair Parsley leaves us, you responsibilities as vice chair will kick in.
Yeah, probably for the director's report, unless we move through this pretty quickly.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to move through the professional service agreement. So we have been in talks with the Nisqually tribe for several months, settling on a level of service that both we can provide the Nisqually tribe, as well as a level of service that they are wanting for their tribal community, as well as their tribal police. And so I am currently asking JASCOM for the approval for me to sign this contract so that we can begin to provide services for the Nisqually tribe. The total overall contract is for $75,000 annually. Part of the services that we are providing is law enforcement assistance, as well as having the ability to quarantine animals when needed. And we will also accept injured stray animals and accept owner surrenders from tribal community as well. So it's a mutual contract that I know both parties are excited to begin.
Sarah, is this similar to the JBLM contract, or are they asking for different services?
They're asking for different. So JBLM is just going and picking up and housing strays. This is much more. It's allowing community members to receive services such as owner surrender, stray drop off, quarantining of rabies quarantine animals, as well as handling of the afterwards of like the dangerous dogs. So once tribal police has designated the dog dangerous, we would assist with that handling as well. And then we would also be a part of their agency assist. So when they call out when there's issues, we would help them just like we do with TCSO or LPD, OPD, and Tumwater Police Department. So it's kind of a mixture, more than JBLM, but less than our Yelm contract. So we're not doing full services for the Nisqually tribe, but we are doing partial services.
You consider this agreement to be kind of a jumping off point with the tribe, or is this something that
Perhaps this could be a testing of the waters for both of us, to see if both parties are mutually satisfied or if there is a want for increase of services in the future. But this was our jumping off point of where to start, of where they felt their biggest needs were in their community.
What do they do for services now?
They don't have any.
They got nothing.
They have nothing. So there's no place for stray animals to go. There's no place for their community members to surrender pets. And if a law enforcement agency does have to seize them, there is no housing for those animals. And so we're helping with that.
Can you remind the commission, because we have Yelm and we have JBLM, one, what we're doing for Yelm and what we're getting per year for both of those contracts?
So for JBLM, we are getting $40,000 a year. And that is for transportation and pickup and housing for stray animals on the base. And then for Yelm, it is a full service contract, where they are getting all the same services as the jurisdictions. And that is, their contract is a per capita. And so there is for $45,000.
Sarah, maybe for anybody who's watching, too, just want to explain a little bit about where this revenue goes to.
The revenue does go, it's part of our shared revenue expenses. So our contracts are revenue for the shelter, but in terms of a budgetary distribution, all of our shared revenue, the jurisdictions do get to, I'm trying to phrase this. All of our shared revenue does go to lowering the 4 jurisdictions' assessments on a yearly basis. So that is overall. So that's included all of our contracts, our contract with the coffee stand, partial adoption revenues, things like that, all go to our shared revenue that lower those assessments for the jurisdictions.
One question, have we, I would hope come next year, maybe January, February, March, because it might take a bit of time, to compare the cost, increase in cost of these contracts versus the budget revenue stream. In other words, is it really behooving us to do this? And then just so that in the future we can be able to justify to the 4 jurisdictions who are putting in the assessment that this really is worthwhile. And then also for those that are contracting with us would probably want to know this value too. And whether we need to look at increases in periodic assessment of whether we need to go higher on our contracts in 3 to 5 years. It'll only be 1 year within Nisqually, a little less, but it'll be how many years with Yelm and JBLN. So we'll be able to have some information for that.
No, we will. We've had JBLM for longer than I've been here, so over 5 years, but we did do a significant increase when I got here for JBLM. And then Yelm, I believe, was in 2021.
Okay. Any other questions?
So I do need a vote of approval so I can sign the contract.
So the motion is to sound that we approve the executive director entering into this contract and signing this agreement. Is that appropriate?
Yeah. Do you have any
No,
additions?
that works perfectly. I would say motion to approve the executive director signing the Nisqually contract. I think that was exactly what you just said, Chair Marshall.
Yes.
I'm trying. Okay. So anyone want to motion that of the 4 jurisdictions?
One last question before we
Yes.
so our insurance wise, are we is this going to have an effect on the current insurance that we have, or are we the contractor insuring transit?
We are the contractor insuring, but it doesn't. This is our standard. This is our standard. It was agreed, like we negotiated this before we put it out there. Our lawyers have looked at it. This is our standard.
Which is cool.
Yeah.
Is it going to increase our premium?
No.
No. Okay. Then I would move that we have authorize the executive director to enter into the professional services agreement between JASCOM and the Nisqually tribe for professional services.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
So call for the question. So if the director is signing, is she signing on behalf of the board?
I'm
Yes.
signing on I'm technically signing on behalf of Joint Animal Services with authorization from the board.
That's a good way to put it. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay.
There's an interlocal agreement
This is
that
just a
binds
basic
together
interlocal.
joint animal services.
It would be similar to sometimes when our city managers do it.
Correct.
It'll be an ILA, Peter.
Well, this is a professional service agreement, but we have an interlocal between all of the jurisdictions to allow and authorize Sarah to sign on behalf of joint animal services.
Okay, so I am I think we should move to the vote.
So you're second. We've already had a
Yes.
first and a second. Okay. Thank you, Peter. I appreciate your question. That was a good one.
Chair, just to
All right.
really quickly, Chair, just to clarify, we have Deputy Mayor Miller, you had the first, and Commissioner Klaus, you had the second?
Correct.
Yes.
Second too.
Alrighty. More discussion? Don't want to rush this. Okay. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Same sign? Okay. Excellent. It looks like we are approving our executive director to enter into this agreement.
So how long did it take you to put this together?
The PSA.
Ms. Molly?
Yeah, we have been working on this since April of last year.
Peter, are you ready to take the meeting? I am really sorry about this. I will not let this happen again.
So, have a nice
Okay.
evening.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And I'm sorry I have to leave early.
Thank you, Lisa.
So,
Yeah.
Sarah, we were at the service agreement.
We finished the service agreement, and so we are actually, and we already did the budget amendment, and so we're at the director's report.
Okay, please proceed. Please go ahead.
All right. So I am excited to announce we're fully staffed. So we're very excited. And I want to take an opportunity to announce our new volunteer and outreach coordinator, Megan McKay. She comes to us with loads of experience, including being the volunteer manager for the Humane Society of Tacoma and Pierce County. So she enjoys camping, exploring new eateries in Tacoma, and spending lots of time with her rescue furry family. And she has already started last week. She was off organizing things, reaching out to all the volunteers, contacting everybody, sending out emails. And so she is off to a great start. We've talked about some priorities of what we need to be looking at. And hopefully she'll be coming to give her own presentation later this year of what the volunteer program looks like and what she hopes it to be in the future. We had our quarterly meeting with TCSO in March, and I am happy to report, according to the captains, that our deputies of TCSO have no issues with us. They've been very pleased with the services that we've been providing. They felt like we've been very responsive. We got 3 particular items that were given to us for feedback that was about our response and coming out quickly and handling items for the deputies. So we have these quarterly. We've also initiated quarterly meetings with all of our law enforcement agencies that we partner with. So we're looking to have those both with Tumwater, Olympia, and Lacey so that we can keep the communications open, talk about any issues that may arise. What's really been great about this is because we've been having these meetings for 2 years, if the issue can't come up, which doesn't happen very often anymore, the captains just call directly and ask. And it's opened up that communication in the sense that it's not, there's things that aren't stewing, people aren't talking about it. If there's an issue, I know I'm going to get a call from one of the supervisors or the captains asking what's going on, but that hasn't happened in a long time. And this last one, it was all positive compliments from the deputies themselves.
Sarah, what does TCSO stand for?
Thurston County Sheriff's Office. Okay. We also had a group from Lewis County come and tour the shelter. It was a really great, it was actually a really great learning session with members of Lewis County, Centralia and Chehalis officials all came in for a tour. This included both Chehalis and Centralia PD. And they came in to see how we do our operations, and they had questions about the ILA and how our joint service agreement works with the jurisdictions. And just also lots of operational questions in general about sheltering. And so this has been a really great partnership for us to be able to, work with Lewis County. We've been able to provide them SOPs and connect them also with other animal welfare professionals that can help them with any questions that they have about animal sheltering. So that was really excited. It was for a couple of hours. Shannon joined us as well. And they got not just the nickel tour, but the quarter tour, a little bit pricier tour. So then moving on, I do want to talk about, we had our quarterly presentation with the Board of County Commissioners. There was again continued discussion. If you guys recall from our last meeting, the Thurston County Sheriff has denied us use of citation booklets. And has told us and both the Board of County Commissioners that he will not be providing citation booklets to my officers for civil infractions. This has led to a discussion with the Board of County Commissioners if they are authorized to grant us authority to issue citations through the Board of County Commissioners. Now with that, the board is still undecided about whether or not they even want to grant us that authority. Because leading into the next item on the discussion is they don't necessarily want to grant us authority if they're going to be looking at changing what service level they want us to provide them in Thurston County. So it has been asked and they would like it up for discussion that they reconsider full services and what modified or no field services for Thurston County looks like. So I am bringing this to JASCOM's attention for a couple of reasons. One of which is in our ILA. JASCOM does have responsibility in terms when requests like this are made. So JASCOM has to vote or look at all of the options and vote on and recommend what option they believe is best. And so it takes a vote from JASCOM for Thurston County to technically even move to modified or no field service. So that's one responsibility. Two, there are other items to look at, and that is from a financial perspective. So there is items within the ILA that allow for a shifting of field services if one cannot pay. But then that is also looking at, there's certain requirements that jurisdiction still has to pay, like staffing, certain supplies, but then the other jurisdictions take on the rest of the cost. So that is one of the items that you guys would have to look at in terms of what is the best option for Thurston County.
So let's just slow that down a little bit.
Yeah.
And bring it back, rewind. So on the commissioner's agenda will be whether JASCOM is going to have field services or not.
Whether Joint Animal Services will provide field services to the county.
Now, if I remember right, in one of our most recent meetings, we talked about how the field services numbers were up.
Correct.
And we had some call rerouting to make sure that people don't get disconnected, people don't just get thrown into the abyss, and that we are able to really respond well when those phone calls come in.
Correct.
Just went through all that.
Yep.
Okay. And are you saying that since that time, the sheriff's office has said we will no longer be giving you citation books, or is that something, did those
That
things?
was all year last year.
That was all year
And
last
it's
year?
continued into this year.
Okay. And so consequently, this issue is going to rise to the commissioner's agenda level?
It's already arisen. I have been given instruction by the board to give them different levels of service, and I have told them that I require more feedback from them in terms of what services that they're wanting so that I can take that into account.
Okay.
So it's a twofold issue, right? The county can request this of JASCOM and say, we would like to look at different services or modified services that Joint Animal Services provides. However, JASCOM has to vote and approve one of their jurisdictional partners to make that change. There's also other options to look at, and this is just to throw out for everybody's consideration. If the county chooses to not have us do field services anymore, Then, for example, one of the options JASCOM could look at is moving the county to a sheltering contract and no longer be in the ILA.
What's the basis of not having the citation booklets? Like, I mean, I don't really understand, like, what is the legal requirement to have the booklet? You know, like, is there training, or they have to be a commissioned officer, or what has to be, what's the certification for a person to write a citation?
It's really about the audit process of making sure that all the citations are accounted for within the booklet, like what has been distributed and what hasn't. Thurston County is the only jurisdiction that doesn't allow us to have citation booklets. So OPD, LPD, and Tumwater PD all check out citation booklets to us.
Dr. Smith, I guess to answer part of the question that you asked too, of like, what kind of certificate or like training do you need to have? You know, a couple of years ago, we did have a limited commission. However, we've gone through the process supported by new state laws where we aren't doing that anymore. And like Sarah just mentioned, again, we have citation booklets from the rest of the partners here in Joint Animal Services. So, you know, as far as who can access citation books, it would be accessible to any of our field service officers.
And do the field services, like, when they go out, they regularly cite, you know?
We don't regular, Peter, I do see your hand. I'll answer in just 1 second. I wanted to acknowledge I saw your hand raised. We go educational based first. So we're not running around like issuing citations to everybody that we meet. It's a multi-pronged and multi-stepped process. So, you know, we could give every single person a barking citation, for example. We don't. We start with a letter saying, hey, your neighbors have complained about your dog barking. Here's some tools to utilize to mitigate that. If it persists, then that's what it escalates to a citation. So we don't necessarily run around just citing everybody. It's used judiciously and in an escalation process with engagement and education first, with then punitive being the outcome if they're continually not rectifying the situation.
So if you're not citing in Thurston County, like, do the police get involved and they cite?
Yes, so currently what we have to do is when we're at the point of writing a citation, we have to call dispatch and request a TCSO deputy to meet us to write the citation.
Have they suggested anything else, like in citation enforcement is an issue, or collecting, or none of those things? And this is coming up on the commissioner's agenda
I presented on apparently 30/20, not
That's March.
I thought maybe it was like back in the military dates, and I thought, oh yeah, let me just.
It's 30 years ago. Okay. No, back in March, this was brought up again, but this has been the ongoing discussion for both January and March, where the county is unsure. And it was also, I believe, a discussion at the budgetary vote for the county that they wanted regular check-ins on our performance this year before they would vote on continuing full services in the future.
So with what Sarah just said, she's going before the Board of County Commissioners on a quarterly basis. So the last report was in March, and she'll be going back in front of the Board of County Commissioners sometime in the June timeframe as well.
Yep, sure. And then in September.
And then I think I saw you on Lacey's agenda for tomorrow night.
I am. I'm presenting tomorrow night.
Will you be bringing this?
We'll be presenting broadly on Joint Animal Services and talking about some of the items that are in the director's report.
Sure.
I don't believe I directly address this, but I can if a question arises.
Sure.
Peter.
I think it's a good awareness piece.
So I was going to focus on the enforcement part of that. Looked like there have been 1 or 2 questions. So can you clarify, if JASCOM is not going to do a field service, is there any suggestion, and how would enforcement look like, or what it's going to look like right now?
So, Councilmember Agapi, I think the question was what was going to be the impact to Thurston County if they did not get their field services from Joint Animal Services? Is that correct?
That is correct.
So the impact is they're looking at their sheriff's office taking over all animal control for unincorporated Thurston County.
And do you know if they did that, if there's going to be any kind of coordination with JASCOM? Because I don't imagine that the sheriff is just going to go out there without current field service of JASCOM actually calling them or being in contact with them. I mean, did they say how they were going to do that?
There has not been any direct details. I do know in November of last year, the sheriff presented that they could utilize the money that they pay us for field service to hire 2 animal control officers of their own. So I believe that's his plan.
And you would still take the animals?
Right.
Or
It depends.
they're gonna,
It depends. It depends on what they're looking at. I can't answer that question at the moment.
So now then that of course brings the question of facilities.
It does, and that's exactly it. So part of this is that at some point, the Board of County Commissioners is going to have to, whatever decision that they make, they're going to need to stay with. Because it does affect where we're going with our building, right? So, and looking at even, I would say that is something for JASCOM to consider in terms of a new building. So ILA members are currently the ones who would be looking at paying for some of that building. So whether or not the county becomes a sheltering contract changes their responsibility for a new building. I would also say, depending on what level of service that they want, that will also change the building. So if they decide that they would like to also do their own sheltering, that would reduce our animal intake by about 45%. And that would drastically change the price tag of the building as well.
So I think, Commissioners, one thing just to highlight is, Sarah's bringing this forward just for awareness, and obviously a lot more diligence and discussion needs to occur on these items, but she wanted you to know just kind of what the conversation was going on at the Board of County Commissioners, and then also what was in the interlocal agreement for Joint Animal Services Commission specifically, and she highlighted those 2 sections that were most pertinent, where as discussions continue, there may be something where this commission needs to actually take and review and make a determination on services moving forward. So we just wanted to make sure that you were all aware of what was in the interlocal agreement and what the conversations have been to date. And certainly we still have a lot of information gathering and conversations to be had at this point. So this is just a starting point, but I think as Sarah mentioned with the comment, Deputy Mayor, that you brought up, is that we are trying to think of our future plan for not only 2 years down the road, but going all the way to 2045. And this is going to have a huge impact on Joint Animal Services and this commission moving forward. So being aware that, in this process, some of the things that we have to look at right now and decisions that may be made in the next couple of years are going to impact this organization for a significant period of time moving forward.
Commissioner Klaus.
Thank you. So I've been rapidly note taking to try to get all the details that I can about what's been going on. And I appreciate you, Sarah, for taking time last week to talk with me a little bit about this issue so I could be up to speed as much as possible before tonight's meeting. I just wanted to ask, for my own benefit and also for those who might be listening, clarification on the process of the issue around citation booklets. Particularly, you said about 1 year ago is when conversations started taking place about citation booklets with the Sheriff's Department. And I'm wondering, why is the Sheriff's Department so much different than the other jurisdictions? And is it too late for them to go back and approve this now? Or is it, now that it's in the commissioner's hands, we have to, or the Board of County Commissioners has to make that decision and it is no longer up to the sheriff?
I am not versed enough in law enforcement to be able to tell you whether or not the sheriff's department has a different like a different policy or how they handle citation booklets. So I cannot speak to the sheriff on his reasonings for that. But yes, conversations started June of last year. Is that about right? And we noticed that we were not getting our citation booklets back in April when we had our quarterly meeting and addressed it at that time. And then we readdressed it in June with the sheriff. And so it's not too late. He could absolutely choose to make the decision to provide us citation booklets. But the alternative is that the Board of County Commissioners has decided through legal advice that they can also authorize the citation booklets.
Okay, thank you. Do you know off the top of your head when you're not coming back until June for a briefing for the board? Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. It sounds like it might be beneficial considering the sense of urgency. I mean, you need a new building. You're moving forward with looking into how you can make that happen. It might be worth it for me to bring to the board's attention that we need a work session on this before June.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, I'll write that down, and during our reports tomorrow, I'll bring that up and see if we can get you on the calendar sooner.
Commissioner Klaus, as part of, that future workshop, I think too, one of the questions that Sarah, in order to do an analysis of what that could look like are also what services are important to the Board of County Commissioners if they are going to be looking at some sort of reduced field services. And so we need a little bit more information on that to even start the analysis, to bring forward what could be possibilities, but also recognizing that those possibilities also require additional conversations with Joint Animal Services Commission.
Okay, that sounds great. And I can make sure I present that question. I had written that down earlier when Sarah mentioned it, that one of your lingering questions for the board was what levels of service are we asking you to present to us? So maybe me and you can get together either one-on-one or we can email and figure out what those options might look like so that I can bring that to the board's attention as well when we do our check-ins and kind of hopefully get that answer for you before you have to come before us to make best use of our time as a group.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, it definitely would be helpful if I understood what levels that the board is wanting, right? And so I can give you some general ideas, but it's really going to be about what the Board of County Commissioner finds of value that they're willing to pay for. And what services may or may not be included in that. But we can talk further so at least you have some general guidance to broach them so they kind of have an idea of what I'm looking for.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions before I move on? Fantastic. Keep going. There we go.
Are we still on director support, Sarah?
Got a few more items on the director's.
Yes, I just have a couple more items and then I'm done. I'm almost done, I promise.
Okay.
So I did want to talk about, we had Brittany Fleming, who is the founder of Save the Unicorn. She created a unicorn foster program when she worked at Gateway Pet Guardians, and we received a grant from Best Friends Animal Society to pay for her to come out and work with the team, and specifically work with our positive outcomes coordinator to help us develop programming to work with our harder to place dogs. And so for us, a unicorn is any dog that's going to sit in the shelter for longer than our normal length of stay. So if that dog has a behavior issue, a medical issue, we're looking at marketing techniques, recruiting fosters, what recruitment looks like for those fosters, and internal programming like play groups and items like that, so that these dogs have a place to thrive. Nelson, right here was one of our unicorns, is one of our unicorns. He's currently in foster. And this was one of the photographs. So one of our sessions was a photograph session of all of our quote unquote unicorns at the shelter, Nelson being one of them. Isn't he a handsome boy? And so it was really great. And part of the program too, she was with us for an entire week, but we also maintain that support for the rest of the year. So she will work individually with Becca and other members of our team virtually to help plan, write SOPs, and develop protocols for our new unicorn animals. We also finally got our new vehicle. So 2 years ago, we had it in our budget to purchase a new truck. Because of all the supply issues, it took us 2 years to have this beautiful truck, which was happily delivered fully equipped. This is before we've had the logo and everything put on it. But each of these cabs are individually heated and cooled. We also have one of the kennels has an actual lift. So for when you have a larger dog that you can't heft up into one of the kennels, you can put them in and have the wench come lift them in. So we really like it. It's 4-wheel drive, completely set up, but we're very excited. This was ordered 2 years ago and we're so excited. And then our Happy Tails. So this is Elsie, Lucy, and Dr. Phil. This is a multi-time adopter who has not only adopted a dog, but also 2 cats from us that all live happily ever after together. And so this was a great story. We did a post on our social media asking for alumni to send us photos and updates on their adopted pets. And we just got inundated with lovely stories of great photos of our animals in their forever homes and getting some great updates. And this was one of them. She kept sending me more and more pictures of each of the animals and telling me stories, which was great. And that's my director's report.
Missed the alumni.
It was a little bit ago. You can still send me your alumni message. Yeah.
Always accept them.
We always accept alumni messages.
I like save a folder. If I get an email come through with it, I like have a folder for like a bad day. You're like, okay, you look at like the post-adoption updates.
Yep, and if we get them in our email, the staff will actually, whoever checks that email will actually post it to our like Teams chat so that everybody can get the update and see all the photos. So it really makes everybody's day to hear how our shelter animals are doing. Oh, Peter, you're on mute.
What do you know? Sure. Okay. So does anybody have anything to say before we call it a day? Sarah, when is our next meeting?
Our next meeting is May 6th.
13th.
13th. No, 13th. May 13th.
May 13th. Okay. So having said that and nothing else from anybody, so I move that we adjourn and we'll meet again on May 13th.
Second.
Okay. So on that note, you guys have what?
We don't need a vote to adjourn. You can just adjourn the meeting.
Well, you know, we wanted to be proper, right? So on that note, I will see you guys on May 13th and you guys have a nice evening.
Thank you. Have a good evening.